Anytime the Sacramento Kings beat the Los Angeles Lakers, it's always a good thing, even if the game doesn't officially count. Mike Brown shocks us with his starting lineups, and Keegan Murray shines again. We should be used to it at this point. We'll talk about the Kings preseason opener right here on the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer at ABC 10 News here in the California capital. And like I said, the Kings beating the Lakers, especially the Kings beating the Lakers by 30 points. Even if it's preseason, it feels a little sweeter, doesn't it? And especially when we finally have a lot of context to at least the thought process of Sacramento Kings head coach Mike Brown here in the early going. Now, there still are 3 preseason games before the Kings officially open their season against the Portland Trail Blazers on Wednesday, the 19th, I believe, is the day. And the Kings actually will play the Portland Trail Blazers at home for their second preseason game coming up here on Saturday. So while they're a little over 2 weeks away from the start of the regular season, over those 2 weeks, a lot can change. You can get a lot more context both in preseason gameplay and in practice time. But I will be the first to admit I was not expecting KZ Okpala to start at the 4. Even with on Saturday, getting to watch scrimmages at the end of practice and seeing that KZ Okpala and Kings starters lineup versus what ended up being the main bench 5 lineup. I thought that was just situational based off of a handful of scrimmages that both teams had played, and it was just KZ's turn maybe to get a look at what he could do defensively at the 4. I did not at all expect Okpala to be the choice to start at the 4 spot for Mike Brown. And I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. The best that I can understand is, well, number one, there's familiarity between Okpala and Mike Brown. KZ Okpala playing for the Nigerian national team, so they have a history there. And I have said in the build-up to training camp that I believe that a lot of the lineup decisions and rotation decisions that Mike Brown is going to make, it's going to be based off of who provides a significant impact defensively or who can come in and play to the level of Mike Brown's defensive system and his expectations defensively. And it makes sense that KZ Okpala could potentially be that guy. Mike Brown said that he thinks KZ Okpala has defensive player of the year capabilities. The question is, though, how much do you sacrifice on the offensive end of the floor in order to improve defensively? Because I think KZ Okpala is capable offensively of making an impact, but is it worth not starting Keegan Murray? Is it worth not starting someone who we believe is still going to be a fantastic fit on both ends of the floor? Maybe defensively, he's not ready right away to play and perform at the level of KZ Okpala, and KZ's got the wingspan, the athleticism, the intangibles defensively that make him such an exciting prospect on that end of the floor. But is it potentially worth the offensive drop-off to have KZ Okpala start the game for his defense? And it's not just the offensive drop-off of KZ Okpala not being able to hit shots or not being able to fill up the scoring column. It's very similar to like the Mo Harkless situation from last season, right? Mo Harkless was one of the best defenders on the team. He was a go-to defender for Luke Walton right out of the gate to guard 4s. And he struggled to hit shots. Because he was struggling to hit shots, the floor was not spaced as well, which means De'Aaron Fox and the rest of the offense struggled. So if KZ Okpala is going to be out there, he has to hit 3-pointers at enough of a consistent rate to either make defenses pay for sagging off of him to help on De'Aaron Fox, help on Domantas Sabonis, or he has to make a high enough volume of 3s to force his man to not help and stay on him on the perimeter. If not, I think it's more of a net negative than it is a net positive. I'm not going to overreact to it, though. This is one preseason game. And honestly, truth be told, I hope that we get another preseason game or two with that starting lineup to see if it works. I don't think we should take KZ Okpala out of the starting lineup based off of how this Sacramento Kings game started, which, by the way, was not good. The Kings and Lakers game started very much in the favor of the Los Angeles Lakers. We will get into that. But to me, still, if you're asking me right now who should be in that starting spot, based off of Summer League, based off of where he was drafted and the belief of what he can provide at that 4th overall pick, and now based off of the context of what he was able to do in his preseason debut, it's Keegan Murray. Like, Keegan Murray fits with what the Sacramento Kings are trying to do. Keegan Murray has shown now time and time again that he can flow within the flow of the or rather score within the flow of the offense, regardless of who he's sharing the floor with. Like, Keegan Murray shows up in his first ever preseason game against the Los Angeles Lakers, and he plays the most minutes out of anybody, which I think is great. I'm glad that Keegan Murray played the most minutes out of everybody. You want him to get that time to get acclimated to the league. Keegan should be at the top of minutes played this preseason, no question about it. He plays 21 minutes. He scores 16 points, shoots an extremely efficient 7 of 11 from the field and 2 of 4 from three-point range when the Kings as a team had a very inefficient shooting night. Also pulls down 6 rebounds and has a couple of steals. Like, Keegan Murray had a fantastic debut. I know it's preseason. I know he wasn't always playing against the best of the best competition, just like the excuses you could rack up for his performance in Summer League. But at what point does the excuse go away and the recognition for the consistency start to come into play? Because Keegan now consistently has done this night in and night out every time he's put on a Kings uniform, honestly, with the exception of that 9-point game, the second California Classic game that he played, but he still helped and made impact or was impactful in other ways and was still getting good shots in that game. With the exception of one game, every time Keegan Murray has suited up for the Sacramento Kings, he has looked excellent offensively. Defensively, of course, there are things that he and the entire team needs to work on. And I understand, I saw arguments and debate and conversation when we found out that KZ Okpala was going to be starting. One of the things that I saw brought up on social media was, well, KZ Okpala is going to be guarding LeBron James in this starting lineup. Why? You don't want to throw your rookie out there and have him guard arguably the greatest player of all time. While I understand that argument from a regular season standpoint, this is preseason. The score doesn't matter. If Keegan goes out there and gets torched, but he learns from it, that's all I care about. I was happy to see, though, that Keegan was one of the first 2 players off the bench. He and Davion Mitchell were one of the first 2 players off the bench. And Keegan was then guarding LeBron James and got that opportunity. It did fine. LeBron didn't embarrass him. LeBron didn't put 20 points on his head or score relentlessly. Keegan Murray also didn't really shut down LeBron either. It was just kind of fine, which is great, I think, for your first ever time guarding one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time. This game did not start well for the Kings. Did not start well at all. Well, actually, the very, very, very beginning was great. The Kings opened up the scoring with Kevin Huerter hitting his first 3, and it was a perfect shot. Great to see Kevin Huerter get himself going. That was pretty much all that the Kings did from beyond the arc in the first half. But the 12 points in just over 3 minutes allowed is concerning. And it's very similar to what the Kings have done in the past. Very similar. Like 12 points in 3 minutes or just over 3 minutes. Like, that was like clockwork for the Sacramento Kings last year. Of course, a lot of the starters are returning players for the Kings. So these are habits that are going to take it. They're going to take a while. They're going to take time to break, right? We don't expect things to just be fixed overnight. However, here's the positive that I'm choosing to focus on more than the 12 points allowed. And by the way, with those 12 points allowed, 3 of them were layups that De'Aaron Fox allowed. 2 of them came from Russell Westbrook. 1 of them came from Kendrick Nunn when he was switched onto Kendrick Nunn. Like, De'Aaron, we know, has to get better defensively in that sense. I'm not putting all the blame on him because one of them, the Kendrick Nunn layup, he was screened off. But I'm saying his man was able to get to the rim. Russell Westbrook, I thought, played really well and looked really good in his Lakers re-debut or season debut for Los Angeles. I think I saw the Kings perimeter-wise really struggling to deal with him. But here's the positive I'm taking out of this, because I'm choosing to look at it this way, and I think it's important to look at it this way. The Kings were down 12-3 just barely over 3 minutes into the game. The Lakers had shot 5 of 7 from the field over that stretch. Mike Brown calls a timeout. The starting lineup runs to the sideline. It's like, okay, he's obviously not happy with the defensive start. Is he going to make changes? Did this starting lineup not work? Is he going to go to his bench? Maybe he goes to Keegan Murray. Maybe he goes to Davion Mitchell right away. No. Mike Brown decides to leave the same 5 starters in the game. Say, let's get refocused here. This is what we need to do. Go out there and execute. You can be better defensively. And offensively, the shots will start falling. They come back out. And again, after trailing 12-3 in the first 3 minutes and some change into this game, Mike Brown calls the timeout. By the time the first substitutes of the game are made for the Kings, the score is 14-9. The Lakers started 5 of 7 shooting from the field. The next 10 shots, they went 2 of 10. Defensive adjustments, accountability. That's what you want to see from Kings head coach Mike Brown. And the microphone caught Mike and assistant coach Jordi Fernandez screaming from the sidelines a ton, communicating as much as possible. The mic even picked up a couple of times De'Aaron Fox chatting and holding his teammates accountable and talking while on the floor, really leading with his mouth. Now, was he screaming at everybody? Absolutely not. That's not who De'Aaron Fox is. But I overheard De'Aaron talking to his teammates, talking about defensively, telling players where they needed to be. I like to hear that. I love to see that. We saw glimpses of accountability, and I like the fact that we saw the Sacramento Kings make an adjustment right away, even if it's preseason and the final score doesn't necessarily represent how these two teams will fare during the regular season. To see the Kings go up against the Lakers starters, struggle early on, take a timeout, and make an adjustment and have more success against the same Lakers starters, that is an indication of how things can go during the regular season. I was happy to see that. So I choose to take more of a positive, way more of a positive than a negative out of that start for the Sacramento Kings defensively. I do want to talk about how their defense and transition kept them in the game when they were really struggling offensively. Also, I'm not a big fan of the Kings bench unit, that 5-man bench unit that we saw both in scrimmages and play a lot together last night. I'm not a big fan of them offensively. I'll explain more in just a little bit after I tell you about a great sponsor of the Locked On Kings podcast, a returning sponsor for yet another season. They've been with us for a long, long time. Built Bar. And if you haven't tried the Built Bar Puffs yet, you're depriving yourself truly of one of life's greatest joys. There's a new flavor, delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to this cookie dough chunk puff. It's a protein-infused marshmallow with cookie dough chunks inside of it. It's like candy. It's delicious, but it's good for you. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. 15 grams of protein, only 160 calories. These things are so good for you. They can replace that sweet tooth without you having to go cold turkey on the sweets that you enjoy. Of course, in addition to the puffs, you can get the classic Built Bars, and there are many, many flavors. Highly recommend the Mint Brownie Bar. You can try their new Built Granola Bars, whether you're going out on a hike or going to play golf or whatever it is. There are so many options, all of them good for you, all of them packed with protein. Whatever you get, go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15 and get 15% off your order. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at Built.com. Normally, if you were to tell me that the Sacramento Kings would shoot 40% from the field and, 26% or something like that overall from three-point range, 23% is even worse than that, 7 of 30. If you were to tell me that, I would say, wow, the Kings probably struggled to win that game. I would not have told you that the Kings had won by 30 with those shooting numbers. But again, final score, not exactly accurate to how this game would have gone. The second half, neither the Kings or the Lakers starters played. So what was it that kept the Kings in the game when the Lakers starters were playing that allowed them to win this game or stay in the game at the very least? It was both their transition offense, which the Sacramento Kings outscored the Lakers in transition in this game 14-3. The Kings went 50%, 6 of 12 in their transition scoring opportunities. It was that, and it was their defense. While I wouldn't say Sacramento's defense was stellar or locked down at any point in the first half. Third quarter, different story. But in the first half, against the best of the best the Lakers had to offer, defense wasn't stellar, but they did enough to make life difficult enough for the Lakers to where when the Kings were really struggling offensively and trying to figure themselves out offensively, they were only down by a maximum of 10 points. The largest the Lakers lead got was 10 points. The Kings kept it in single digits for the remainder of the game when they were trailing. Beyond that, they were always hovering around that 5, 6, 7, 8 point mark, even when offensively they weren't able to get things going. They didn't allow the Lakers to go on massive runs, except for at the very beginning of the game. And I wouldn't even call it massive. A 12-3 run is not massive. It's significant, but it's not massive. But the massive runs that we saw the Kings give up consistently last season, those appear to be gone. Or at least in this one game, appeared to be gone. Because the Kings were due for minimum one of them, most of the time, two of them per game. And who knows, maybe the Lakers would have gone on one in the second half. We know how much the third quarter has been an issue for the Sacramento Kings in the past. Maybe if the Lakers starters had played in the third quarter, maybe they would have gone on a massive run. They didn't. We don't have that context. All we have is the context of the first half, and the Kings defense did well enough to make up for the offensive struggles. Because in years past, last season, had the Kings started that poorly offensively, they would have been down by 20 at halftime. Instead, they were down by what? 5? It's pretty good. Pretty good for the Sacramento Kings team. Very happy to see that. I'm not a big fan, I'll be honest with you. I'm not a big fan of the bench 5 that Mike Brown has been showcasing. This is the 5 that we saw wearing the gray pennies or gray jerseys in the Kings scrimmage against the starters on Saturday that got their asses kicked. They lost 12-1 or something like that. De'Aaron Fox and his offensive unit versus Davion Mitchell and his kind of defensive hybrid unit. It's Davion, Malik Monk, Keegan Murray at the 3, Trey Lyles at the 4, and Rashawn Holmes at the 5. I see how this unit could potentially work together. And what I do appreciate is that Mike Brown had that unit out there, those 5 out there a lot together. That was the 5 that started the second half, and they played a good portion of the end of the first and early part of the second quarter. But offensively, they really struggled, just like they struggled offensively to figure things out. A lot of it was isolation. A lot of it was like Malik Monk runners in the lane. When that unit started getting going offensively and getting some rhythm offensively, it was when defense was creating offense in the third quarter, which we will get to. But overall, I don't necessarily blame Davion Mitchell, but as the point guard, it doesn't look like offensively that unit knows how to play together yet. Keegan Murray played really well out of that unit, but offensively, the team didn't look the sharpest. Now, to be fair, nobody really looked sharp, especially when it came to finishing outside of Keegan Murray. Like the Kings missed a lot of shots at the rim. Rashawn Holmes missed a lot of shots at the rim. Domantas Sabonis, who only finished with, I think, 4 points in this game, missed a lot of shots or a decent amount of shots. Well, I shouldn't say missed a lot of shots. He went 2 of 3 from the field. He only took 3 shots. The one that he missed was at the rim. Like the Kings finishing around the rim wasn't the best, especially in the first half. But the way that the ball was moving with the starters, or even with like the starter bench hybrid when Mitchell and Murray came into the game and Mitchell was playing at the 2 spot next to De'Aaron and Keegan Murray was out there at the 4 spot, I felt the ball was moving. A lot of it has to do with Domantas Sabonis. The ball was moving significantly better than it was with that bench 5. I'm just not the biggest fan yet of that bench 5 unit. Not there yet. I think they have potential. I'm glad that they're playing a lot of time together. I don't know how I feel about Keegan Murray at the 3. I just don't think it's the most optimal way of using him. My point, I think the way I look at it is if you're not starting Keegan Murray at the 4 to use him coming off the bench as a 3, even if in this case, offensively, him coming off the bench really was good for the Sacramento Kings. He had a good game. To me, that's not the optimal way to use Keegan Murray. But I don't blame you for trusting Mike Brown with his decades of NBA experience over trusting me, who has really only paid attention to Keegan Murray for the last year. Maybe not even that long. So If you're on the same boat as Mike Brown, if you're okay with what Mike Brown did in this game, I don't blame you at all. I'm totally fine with that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what sticks and what changes throughout the remainder of preseason. Maybe even going into practice availability and Kings practice for the remainder of this week. No practice availability today, unfortunately. Don't even know if the Kings are practicing today. They might have the day off. But I believe we're going to have practice availability tomorrow. And you best believe that Mike Brown's going to be asked about the decision to start KZ and to have Keegan Murray play the 3 spot. I'm going to ask if someone else doesn't, I'm going to ask him about using Keegan Murray at the 3 and what he sees there and what he sees with that bench unit. Wasn't the biggest fan of them offensively. Defensively, though, especially in the third quarter, they did a lot of great stuff. The third quarter was fantastic for the Sacramento Kings in so many ways. We're going to go through just the third quarter box score and look at some of the third quarter numbers that were really encouraging and set up a also fantastic fourth quarter overall. Just great second half for the Sacramento Kings. Plus, I'm going to share with you the best team stat for the Kings from this game. Can't wait to share that with you. I will in just a second. The Sacramento Kings trailed by 5 at halftime. After a 35-13 third quarter, the Kings led 76-59 heading into the fourth quarter, where they continued to pile it on. The third quarter was a clinic for Sacramento. Now, the Kings showed clearly in the third quarter that they have way more depth than the Los Angeles Lakers do. Not surprising. I'm glad that was very apparent. That's how it should be, right? And this Davion Mitchell-led lineup really locked in defensively coming out of the halftime break. Part of me is going to attribute it to they were playing not the starters. They were playing worse competition. Part of me is also going to attribute to, I have a feeling that Mike Brown had some things to say and some adjustments that he made during halftime. And remember, one of the biggest complaints or criticisms of Luke Walton as the Sacramento Kings head coach is lack of halftime adjustments, right? The Kings would go into halftime with a lead, a team would come out in the second half and the Kings would have no answer for it and they would adjust. Or the Kings would be behind in the first half, go into the break, and instead of trying to change things and adjust, come back out, do the same thing, and lose even more. Like that was a consistent problem for Luke Walton. I don't know if it was all on Luke Walton or partially also on the players who were not really able to adjust. Regardless, that was a consistent issue with that former coaching regime. In our first glimpse of Mike Brown in preseason, we have a team that has come out in the second half and looked sharper defensively, looked like they made some adjustments. I know it's preseason. I need a larger sample size, but that's what I wanted to see versus the Kings making the same mistakes. And what did the Kings do in the third quarter? Well, defensively, they finished with 6 steals, 2 of them for Keegan Murray, 2 of them for Davion Mitchell. Keegan Murray had the stretch of just dreams during the third quarter. And if you missed it, I retweeted it. I think Brendan Nunez from the Kings Pulse. Yeah, he's the one that tweeted it out. But the Kings come down on defense, and there's a lob attempt that Keegan Murray stops, gets the rebound, and starts the transition to Davion Mitchell. Davion Mitchell finds Keegan running the floor for the wing 3, no hesitation, hits the 3. Then Lakers come back down the other way, and Keegan Murray is going to get involved defensively, get a steal, jump the passing lane, dunk in transition. Like just a picture perfect chef's kiss sequence for Keegan. Defense leading to offense, showing his versatility on both ends of the floor. But of course, it wasn't just Keegan Murray. Davion Mitchell put on an absolute defensive clinic in the third quarter. It was great to see. There was actually, I want to go back really quick because I thought De'Aaron Fox, I mentioned I was critical of him giving up layups in the early going, but I also have to give him credit for there were a couple possessions where De'Aaron did really well defensively. And it looked like De'Aaron was communicating well. He was rotating well. There was one possession in particular where he was going one-on-one against Patrick Beverley, and he ended up blocking Beverly's shot in the he was trying to hoist a step back 3. Fox blocked the shot, and Beverly was forced to chuck up another one when he recovered possession to beat the shot clock, and it was a shot clock violation. De'Aaron ended up getting dapped up by Patrick Beverly, who said, yeah, you got me on that one after the play. Like, that's really great to see from De'Aaron. That's something that I don't expect him to get blocks consistently on a nightly basis, but that level of on-ball defense, that you're not going to beat me in this possession, that's what I like to see from De'Aaron, that we see a lot from Davion Mitchell, and we saw a lot during the third quarter. But 4 assists, or rather 4 steals between Murray and Mitchell, 6 steals total for the Sacramento Kings in that third quarter. They had 7 transition points, 7 fast break points, 3 of 5 in transition opportunities to the Lakers, 0 in the third quarter. And the Kings built a 17-point lead after trailing by 5 to start the third quarter. Like, you love to see that. It was defense creating offense, and the shooting percentages started to come up. Now, three-point percentage wasn't good. They still shot 27% from three-point range in just the third quarter alone, but field goal percentage went up to 51.9%. Improvement directly because of defense in that third quarter. Two more things that I want to talk about. One of them being the best team stat that I did not expect to see in this game. First off, Mike Brown played 20 guys. 20 guys. He played his entire roster in this game, which is not unexpected because if you listen to the Locked On Kings podcast on Saturday, Mike Brown said in his scrum that he wanted to try and get playing time for everybody to reward them for the amount of hard work that they've been putting in training camp. That's what makes Mike Brown also a player's coach. That's what makes the players respect Mike Brown so much, because while the starters, of course, got heavy minutes, De'Aaron playing 16, well, not heavy, but played a decent amount of minutes in the first half, 16 for Barnes, 16 for Fox, just under 15 for Sabonis. You got everybody a little bit of playing time, including the two-way guys. Keon Ellis and Neemias Queta both played just over 7 minutes. 20 guys played, and look at the shot distribution. If you go to the Sacramento Kings, if you go to the Kings box score in this game and just go through the shot distributions, the field goals attempts, how many different players got shot attempts on the Sacramento Kings, it's pretty awesome to see. You don't typically see that much of a balance, especially when 20 guys play. Everybody was getting their touches. Everybody was getting their opportunities. But here's the thing. You're playing 20 guys. 10 of them are new. And that doesn't include like Sabonis, who only played a handful of games with the Kings at the end of last season. Like 10 of these guys are new, brand new to the team. Never played before. This is their first game together. They're a team that likes to play fast in transition, which typically means early on that you're sloppy as you're trying to maybe go a little too fast or figure everything out, right? 25 assists to 7 turnovers. A 25 assist, 7 turnover ratio would be impressive if just the 5 Kings starters played. That would be an impressive ratio for the Golden State Warriors, who could play together and pass to each other with their eyes closed in their sleep. That is a very, very efficient assist to turnover ratio. And it was done by a team who played 20 guys with half of their roster never played before together. Brand new. That is really impressive. And I know that shocked Mike Brown just as much as that shocked us, because Mike said on Saturday that he was expecting the game to be sloppy. He was expecting sloppy mistakes based off of the fact that the team was so new, based off of the fact that they were going to try and play in transition. I really can't wait to speak to Mike Brown, hopefully tomorrow, because I want to ask him too about that assist to turnover ratio. That's pretty stunning. That's really, really encouraging to me. And I had to make sure to bring that up. Overall, some question marks, some questionable decisions. We'll see what Mike Brown continues to do with his starting lineup. I disagree with the choice of KZ Okpala. Not going to overreact to it. Overall, I take a million more positives than negatives, of course, from this Kings preseason win. Maybe chief of them being the Kings beating the Los Angeles Lakers, right? I hope you enjoyed that game. If you haven't gotten the chance to go back and watch that game, pay close attention to, especially watch the first quarter, watch how bad the Kings got off to defensively, bad of a start, and then watch how they adjusted and how things changed after Mike Brown called that first timeout. And of course, enjoy what Keegan Murray's doing. If you're still skeptical about Keegan Murray, I'm not saying you're wrong. If you need to see more, I understand. I'm just telling you, this kid's legit. He's really, really good, and he should be a starter, in my opinion. But regardless of where he plays, he's going to make a positive impact for the Sacramento Kings, just like he's done literally every time he's suited up for the team thus far. California Classic, Summer League, now his first preseason game when he got opportunities guarding LeBron freaking James. Love what I saw out of the Sacramento Kings. love you for joining me here on this first post-game edition of the Locked On Kings podcast this season. Love having Kings basketball back to talk about. If you want to share your takeaways, your thoughts from this Kings game, please do so. YouTube comment section, get loose down below. If you want to send them to me, you can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. And of course, you can find me on Twitter, reach out, DM me, just tweet directly at me. We don't have to follow each other. At Matt George Sack, SAC on Twitter is how you can reach me there. So we'll see if we get practice availability. I'll be back with that. Plus, this week, Jason Ross from the Kings radio broadcast team from Sacktown Sports 1140 Radio and the former host of the Locked On Kings podcast, he's going to join me to talk about the starting lineups from this game. He's going to join me to talk about closing lineups, rotations in general. We'll get Jay Ross's opinions on what Mike Brown is doing and what he thinks Mike Brown should be doing coming up later this week. Looking forward to having him with me for that. So great week of Kings podcast coming here on the Locked On Kings podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network. Please continue to join me. Also, I found out recently that Locked On Kings is 57th, I believe. Let me double check. 57th on the top 100. Yep, 57th on the top 100 charts on Apple Podcasts for basketball podcasts. And the Kings Beat podcast is in the 70s. That means that this fan base that is supporting a team that has not made the playoffs in 16 years, the longest now active playoff drought in Northern American sports, that fan base is still getting two top 100 podcasts, or is supporting two podcasts to make them. It's not because of us, it's because of y'all making it two top 100 podcasts on iTunes in the basketball category, or on Apple Podcasts in the basketball category. That's incredible. Thank you so much for that. I'll let James Ham and the Kings Beat team thank you on their own time, but I think it's phenomenal. I think it's excellent. They do a fantastic product, a fantastic show over there, by the way. So go and check them out if you haven't already. Really appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.